It is the 7th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 19 minutes past 8. And that means, as always, one thing, that there are very many F1 centric threads at which we need to know must pull. We'll talk in the first instance about King George Russell and those contract negotiations. Toto, the boy who cried wolf. For him, nothing's changed. He will drop kick in the chest one of Kimi Antonelli or King George Russell of Kings Lynn Norfolk if it means he can get a whiff of the signature of one, forcing to high-time champion, the one that you call Max Emilian Verstappen, GOAT. Oh, and by the way, we'll talk about Charles Leclerc and Scuderia Ferrari and now doubts being cast over the stewardship of Frederick Vasseur. So too, we'll talk about Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. There's a brilliant article on Motorsport magazine written by Pablo Elizalde. In it, he says, what else did you expect, McLaren, when you constantly, incessantly put your thumb on the weighing scale of the competitive landscape? Not good enough. And so too, we'll talk about Zak Brown raging in court because of Alex Palou. Again, he's talking about loss of earnings because Alex reneged, because Zak Brown reneged. Alex was promised a potential drive at the F1 team. What did they go and do? Only went and signed Oscar Piastri. So who's breaking whose trust? So John Perry, you're a legend as per usual, mate. I'm grateful ad infinitum to each and every single one of you who indulge my unique brand of F1 nonsensory, B-spec noddy F1 mind that I am. In the first instance, should we talk about George? Because King George Russell still waiting for a contract. This feels like some sort of contractual okie coke. George Russell has been brilliant this year. The context looks like this. Who better to sign that for Mercedes, by the way? The guy that Toto's been saying is going to bring us back to the mountaintop. He's the leader. He's the one to fill the not insubstantial shoes of Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. And then look, why don't you put some actions to those words, Toto? He keeps saying that contract's coming, but there is no contract to be seen. The rumour, word on the F1 curb, is that there are stipulations that George wants a 2+1. Toto, of course, so keen to flirt and sign ultimately one. Maximilian Verstappen doesn't want to give George a 2-year contract because that means in 2027, if he has the opportunity, he'll no longer be able to drop kick in the chest a King George Russell of Kings Lynn Norfolk to sign the ultimate prize, to come through finally on the one that they call Maximilian Verstappen. Here's what's been written courtesy of Autosport this time. For the avoidance of doubt, all F1 journals are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. Autosport writes that Toto is saying good things take a while. That's why the contract is being delayed. Pull the other one, Toto. What are you talking about, mate? You've been negotiating this contract for as long as time itself. What are we doing? And again, lest we forget, context is always key in and amongst these things. Here's why. Because as far as Toto, the boy who cried wolf, is concerned, Ross Brawn said in his book that dealing with Toto, he's fundamentally duplicitous. Don't trust him, therefore, King George, especially when he's your manager and your team principal and CEO of that team. Conflicting demands any. Here's what Autosport writes. The Toto said that good things take a while, and that's why the contract has yet to be announced. At the past Grand Prix weekend in Singapore, Toto said you can expect something imminently, but as at the time of writing, nowhere to be seen. He said contract-wise, good things take a while. It's about the details, and it's not about the big topics. Maybe, therefore, if you're going to trust Toto, which you shouldn't, potentially it's not about the tenure. Potentially, as is rumoured, it's about sponsorship time. It's about bandwidth. It's about the small print, the T's and C's, potentially. Here's what Toto Wolff continues saying. Things have to be done right. And again, George Russell echoes those that the contract needs to be mutually beneficial. He continues, does King George Russell of Kings Lynn Norfolk. I think for any driver, when you get to a certain point in your career, things have to be done right. Every time you renew a contract, it's the most important contract of your life, and it has to be done with due care. There's nothing to worry about, and I will get the contract with Mercedes done. It will get done when it gets done. Oh, the humanity chat. This is chaos. This is too much chaos. I can't cope with it. How very dare Toto, the boy who cried wolf, drag his feet. Now, I know if it were me, I would go all in, 10 toes down, overweight on Max Verstappen PLC. You would have to. Why? Because he's the best driver on the grid. And Toto, as an owner now, no longer just team principal and or CEO, he's an owner, owes to the shareholders of Mercedes F1, Petronas, AMG, et al., all of that gubbins, a fiduciary duty. He wouldn't be doing his job, and he said this a gazillion times. I don't want to be the one to echo Toto, but he's right in this case. He owes, as a shareholder, as the 33% owner of Mercedes AMG Petronas F1, he owes the shareholders a duty, a fiduciary duty, and that necessitates going out and getting the best drivers who can drive the car the quickest. As at the time of writing, of course, you would be an abbot of unreason to argue anything other than that person being Maximilian Verstappen, as good as George Russell has been. Judd bookends his soliloquy this way. You can see when it just merges, the car being in a perfect space. Toto Wolff talking now. The car, okay, so Toto Wolff finally putting some respect on King George's name. This is important now because it feels like a 180 as far as Toto and the lens through which he ingests himself some King George Russell. Quote, he's been formidable this year, has George. I haven't seen mistakes. There were weekends that he himself said, I could have done more and it wasn't a good race, but this happens with any driver. You can see when it just merges, the car being in a perfect space and the driver being on top of things, that becomes a dominant formula, and this is what we've seen here. So of course he's alluding to the Singapore Grand Prix circumstance. When the car was capable, all of a sudden, the understeer was no longer a thing. They tacked on a brand new front wing, and that Mercedes looked proper, did it not? W11, more that than W13. All of that noddy Mercurio circumstance feels like it's gone away, or not, because the guys and girls over at the race have predicted that Mercedes are going to still have problems, that it was an anomalous circumstance even at Singapore. Thermal wear, nothing to be seen. Medium speed, medium duration corners, nowhere to be seen on the Singapore circuit. So maybe we get to the next Grand Prix at Kota and Mercedes all of a sudden drop like a stone, reversion to the mean. We'll see. But it'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out. I'm surprised, as is Ted Kravitz, that on the back of George Russell's success, dropping it on pole with the God tier lap and winning the race ultimately, with Petronas very nearby in Singapore, I'm surprised that they didn't announce that. It would have been a PR open goal. Timeliness, very apropos, deserving as far as George Russell, because he does deserve himself a contract extension. Give that dude what he wants. Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to talk some Scuderia Ferrari because it's getting too chaotic. I can't cope with this anymore. It's too much. The weight of ineptitude is far too hefty for my not insubstantial shoulders to bear. Scuderia Ferrari have been SH1T for the longest time. You heard the stat earlier. 2009, Brawn GP came out of Formula One. Then at the end of 2009, since then, as at the time of writing, we are in 2025 if I recall correctly, Scuderia Ferrari between now and 2009 have led the constructors for less races than Brawn GP, and they haven't turned the wheel in Formula One for 16 years. So what then are we doing? The red team with the red car and the yellow badge and the black prancing horse. So what is going on here? I don't want to go scorched earth because it's bad for my blood pressure, but they leave me with no option. They are wasting away the careers, the prime years, by the way, of Charles Leclerc and Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, but not for long with Charles, because Nicholas Todd is talking to other teams, isn't he? And you'd bet your bottom dollar he should. Pixel, did it happen, Betty? Una, Ferrari are making me sad now, Una. They're making me sad. It's ridiculous. The level of ineptitude and incompetence is an absolute joke. And this is Ferrari that we're talking about. You know the story already. Rob Smedley saying that, listen, if you win, you never have to buy a drink at Fiorano or Maranello, not a meal, nothing, not even a glass of red wine. They've got you. That's the passion of the Tifosi. But if you lose, there will be a point in perpetuity when the Tifosi, the Italians at Fiorano and Maranello, will spit at you in the streets, lest you wish to bring shame on the Enzo Ferrari family name. What are you doing then? Reports are coming out that Charles Leclerc's team is seriously considering his options, not for 2026, that's too soon. What you want to do, if you are a sound F1 mind with will, is pervade the competitive landscape in 2026 and then make your move in 2027. Imagine that Scuderia Ferrari do build a god tier car and power unit, well then you might want to stick as opposed to twist if you are Charles and Lewis. But imagine if the Mercedes do as is rumoured and build themselves a market leading purple sector car, power unit, sustainable fuel by dint of Petronas. Then maybe Mercedes is the play, and you can bet your bottom dollar. If Toto can pair, listen, and here's where it gets techie. Here's why the contract negotiations with George are still ongoing. If Toto could pay, he's always said fiduciary duty. Again, remember, he's a shareholder. He wants to pair the best drivers, the best two available. If he could pair Max and Charles in that Mercedes and drop kick in the chest Kimi and George, you bet your bottom dollar he would do it without compunction, with impunity, not a hesitation in sight. And that's why it's getting techie, and that's why Nicholas Todd et al. Are having conversations on behalf of Charles Leclerc with all of the teams, not just Mercedes but Aston Martin too and Red Bull. Of course he would be stupid, they would be stupid not to. And then you come to find out that today there was this big emergency meeting over at Maranello. The CEO's coming in and having a conversation. John Elkann is there. Vigna is there. All of the key stakeholders, the C-suite execs, as well they might, because nothing is changing. It is getting worse, people. What are we doing as far as Scuderia? It just makes no sense. Chat, I don't even want to buy the bloody road cars. Have you seen how ugly they look? The SFL. I don't know what's going on with Scuderia Ferrari. I was watching Sir Lewis in the bloody Aperta, one of the sexiest cars that's ever been made for the road. Well, whatever happened to that? They're losing ground on all fronts now, not just F1, car manufacturer. Nobody wants to buy those ugly looking Ferrari cars. They have not, nor will they age well. Here's the point though. Remember we talked about Frederick Vasseur, and for a while there it looked like the C-suite execs, inclusive of John Elkann, wanted to appoint somebody else, mentioned no names, Christian Horner. Then all of a sudden they extended his contract because Christian was dealing, no spinning of very many plates over here. They extended Frederick Vasseur and said he was their guy. Rumour, no word on the F1 curb, is that had they had another option that they would have appointed him. But as at the time when they extended Fred, where were the other options? Christian Horner was off doing whatever he was doing. There was nobody else on the table. Jonathan Wheatley, again another option, just signed a long-term contract with Sauber, soon to become Audi. So who else do you appoint? They were in between a rock and a contractual hard space as far as Frederick Vasseur was concerned. And so they did the only thing that was left for them to do: extend Frederick Vasseur, vote of confidence, have at you, Fred, you're our guy, when all the while he was not. And now Gazzetta dello Sport, for the avoidance of doubt, or F1 journalistic publications are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. Gazzetta dello Sport writes they're now losing confidence in Frederick Vasseur's ability to lead that team at the altar of bad decision making. Here's where it gets techie. You know already that some of those engineers would welcome back their prodigal son Carlos Sainz, Mr. Technical Feedback himself, with open arms if they had the chance. Half of them Ferrari lot, the red badge, the red car with the yellow badge, etc, etc. Never wanted to lose Carlos Sainz to Lewis Hamilton in the first place. And now that Lewis is sending out his memos, now that Lewis is getting his arms around the circumstance, they don't want that. Bring back Carlos, they are saying. And who are they blaming for all of that? Not Elkann, more looking at Frederick Vasseur. Here's what Gazzetta dello Sport says: that not everybody agrees with Frederick Vasseur's internal management. And again, for the longest time at Ferrari, those who have come and gone, left Ferrari's employ, have said that it's a suffocating environment of a working culture. Innovation is stifled. You can't make a mistake. And you know how you know this manifest? The communication between the race engineers. We are checking. Let's go to plan A, plan B, plan C, D, E, and F, and Z. Nobody wants to make a mistake. They're scared to be brave and be bold. And sometimes fortune favours the brave and the bold, does it not? Especially in the weird and wacky world that is the F1. Here's what Gazzetta dello Sport says. To a degree, this is inevitable when an organisation at the scale of Ferrari underperforms in perpetuity. Clearly, Frederick Vasseur isn't the only one to blame, but he's a natural target still. Gazzetta expects his position to be called into question. Quote, if this run of underperformance continues into the new regulations next year, it's been suggested that nobody wanted to replace Vasseur. Such is the unique pressure of the position. Do you see what we're talking about, Jack? If there was somebody waiting in the wings, if there were a Christian Horner who were willing, then they would have given him the role. But nobody wanted the role at Scuderia Ferrari. It's a poison chalice. Arriva Bene came and he was the next one, lasted a couple of years. Binotto, a genius F1 mind, but an engineer lacked for the leadership that the likes of Montezemolo have been calling for, gone. Domenicali, I suppose he lasted a while, but ultimately, what did he win? Nothing. The last person to win over there, again, it was the legends. It was the holy trinity of Brawn and Todd and Byrne. Now they're gone. Ferrari have no hope. Or actually two hopes. Slim, very slim, and none. Gazzetta dello Sport says, it was suggested earlier this year that Ferrari management were using the press to send a message to Vasseur. There's no indication at this stage that they've lost faith in his leadership. I disagree. I disagree. You're asking me to disbelieve the evidence of my own eyes and ears. You took long with his contract. If he were the guy, you would have nailed that down ahead of time. What was all this stuff coming out of the Gazzetta and Corriere, both of whom ultimately reporting to Stellantis, the leader of which is John Elkann? You can't run those stories if John Elkann isn't rubber stamping them. So I disagree, Gazzetta. I think you're having a laugh. I just don't think it's not right. It isn't right. Carlito did all right. He wasn't bad, Benzi. It's one of those they didn't need for Carlito to look so good all of a sudden, especially if you want your decision to look correct when Lewis is struggling and Charles is struggling. Maybe if they had Carlito Sainz Jr. there to add some technical insight and technical feedback, translate some driver messages into useful engineering information, maybe they wouldn't be in this hole. But I digress. Turtle Benzi, I don't think Aston as Adrian will not like that. Are you talking about Christian Horner? I think Christian Horner's most likely destination per Joe Sayward is Aston Martin. I mean, previously, we'll touch on this super quickly. Previously, it couldn't be Aston Martin because of how Adrian Newey left. The reason why he left was, of course, because of the misconduct allegation. Adrian Newey and Christian Horner shared a PA. Adrian Newey, he was like, I just want to build cars. Do you know what I mean? Ignore me, miss me with all this salacious allegation and stardom. However, speculation for a second there was that Adrian Newey had a stipulation, a clause in his contract that an anti-Christian Horner clause per se, that Christian Horner couldn't join Aston Martin. Apparently, however, as at the time of writing per Joe Sayward, that those two have buried the hatchet, potentially opening at the door for Christian Horner to come in riding on his white knight. I tell you what's important as well, that Lawrence Stroll is doing something, isn't he? F1, $104. That tells you everything you need to know about a rising drive to survive tide floating all F1 boats. What does that mean? Well, if there were ever a time to sell for Lawrence Stroll, who's been pummeling money, the $250 million or £1 million factory, the £50 million wind tunnel. Capital investment has been chaos. So if ever you wanted to realise some capital appreciation, now would be as good a time for Lawrence Stroll as any. Maybe that maybe the end of Lawrence Stroll ushers in the beginning of Aston Martin with the one that they call Christian Horner. Oh, and by the way, kicking off at McLaren, isn't it? It's all chaotic, chat. I don't even know what to make. Genuinely, I'm like, where do we begin? My heart still goes out to Oscar Piastri, but I think there will be some get back here. Oscar Piastri isn't going to take this line down. As nice as he is, when he gets angry, that makes you know that this isn't it's not a fly-by-night circumstance. This didn't just happen at the Singapore Grand Prix. It happened because of Monza. It happened because of the British Grand Prix. It happened because of Australia. It happened because of Austria. It happened because of Hungary. It happened because he will feel aggrieved now, a woman scorned, like his team aren't giving him a fair shake. It's a brilliant article that speaks to this on motorsport.com. I'm going to have to read it out, courtesy of Pablo Elizalde. In it, he says the following, quote, under any other circumstance, as far as Lando and Oscar's love kiss, Lando Norris's move would have been seen as a racing incident. He was aggressive in an attempt to get to turn 3 ahead of his teammate, but ended up hitting Verstappen's car and bouncing against his teammate Oscar Piastri's. It was clumsy, but not malicious, a chain reaction rather than an attack. At the start of the race, on a narrow set of corners, true, you've got to give it its appropriate context. Lap 1, tax. But, continues Pablo, Norris hit Piastri, breaking McLaren's number 1 rule in the team's book of how it goes about racing and how it tries to be fair to both of its drivers beyond what many consider reasonable, realistic or sustainable. Don't believe me? Well, go on. I've still got the clip ready to go right around Oscar Piastri outlining exactly what it means as far as papaya colours. Do not hit each other. That's all that you need to do. What are we doing here? Roll this clip again. We've played it before, but I've got to do it again. For context is key. Roll the clip.
Been a lot more made out about papaya rules than what there actually is. It is literally one rule, which is don't crash into each other. I think, we've always been very open about how we go racing. And I think, trying to not spring any surprises on us as drivers, that's been the biggest thing, because that's where things become difficult when you don't expect something to happen. There's all been a lot more made out of it.
Listen, I don't think it's good enough. Oscar Piastri will be seeing all the tweets, all of the interwebs going crazy about this, all of the memes, and he won't appreciate it. All he ever asked for, he didn't want the bloody upgrades or he didn't want the suspension, the brand new one, nor did he want the suspension geometry, because they weren't upgrades in terms of absolute terms performance. He didn't care. He wasn't invested in that. Don't give that to Lando. He needs it. If he needs more feedback through the steering wheel, then give that to him. If his driving capabilities aren't sufficiently robust to dial out and manage for the understeer in the car, then you give that to him. But I can manage. All I need, Oscar Piastri has said on a gazillion occasions to anyone who'll put a microphone in front of his face, is a fair shake. Nothing more, nothing less. It's no more simple or complicated than that. Just a fair shake, and he'll be feeling on the back of Singapore, as most of us are, Oscar Piastri fans and neutrals alike, that he's not been getting a fair shake. Again, for the avoidance of doubt, it's the British Grand Prix, it's Monza invert, it's Australia hold station, it's the British Grand Prix, no further action from McLaren. It's them being decidedly pointed, convenient with the times, with when they choose to put their thumb on the weighing scale of the competitive lap. I'm telling you, it's techie, but Pablo sums it up nicer than me. But Norris hit Piastri, breaking McLaren's number 1 rule in the team's book of how it goes about racing and how it tries to be fair to its drivers beyond what many consider realistic or sustainable. As predicted, the Italian Grand Prix scenario where Piastri was ordered to let Norris pass after the British driver lost position with a slow pit stop will come back to haunt McLaren. In some situations, and this was one of those, if McLaren felt that it had to intervene to make things more fair for Norris at Monza, you can't blame Oscar Piastri therefore for asking why his team didn't do anything when Lando Norris broke the cardinal rule at the Singapore Grand Prix of not hitting your teammate. There is one papaya rule: don't hit your teammate. Granted, It would have been an incredibly awkward situation, continues Pablo Elizalde of motorsport.com, to ask Norris to give up the position to Piastri after the stewards decided no investigation was necessary. Let me pause there. Of course, the stewards are going to do it. It's up to the team to intervene. The stewards are never going to punish teammate on teammate crime, but such is the predicament, continues Elizalde. McLaren has put itself in by artificially altering the result. The racing gods are never going to look on this favourably. Never. They've done it too often, too frequently now, and to too great a consequence. It is out of order and it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. That's why you see the crowd chanting Oscar, 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 when Oscar's not even on the podium. It's Lando, because it feels egregious now. It feels disingenuous. It feels like they're conducting their activities all the while talking about how they want to adhere to rules of engagement. It feels like they're conducting their automotive activities not in good faith. Pablo Alisada continues, it would have been incredibly awkward to hand back. It would have been incredibly awkward, but they should have done it nevertheless. That's what they've been saying that they would do all along. To be clear, Elizalde bookends. To be clear, quote, McLaren doesn't need to answer to anyone from outside of its own team, be it fans, media or rivals. So the perception the world has about its protocols is very much irrelevant. But, and critically there is a but, from Piastri's perspective, things might start to look very one-sided. Might? What do you mean might? Pablo, things have to look very one-sided. We've gone through it ad infinitum, ad nauseum. You have exhibit A to Z. We're talking about Monza. We're talking about Austria. It's Hungary. It's bloody it's Australia. Hold station. There's a gazillion examples, and Singapore is just the cherry on top of the cake. Listen, I stand with Oscar Piastri. How can you not at this stage? What are we doing here? It is Oscar Piastri's world, and I feel like we're all living in it, unless, of course, you're named Maximilian Verstappen. If you went to college, you should know. Papaya Eddie, don't. Papaya rules equals micromanagement. A turn of phrase, Una, that one of my old bosses said you should never, ever use. Micromanagement. It just conjures up. The connotations are always negative. It's like feedback, isn't it? Go on then, Panda. Here you go. I don't really care that he hit Oscar. I've been praying for times like this. Some teeth, but I expect Oscar to be up there when it happened, showing equal bites. They domesticated the boy with, are you blaming the victim? Mood. There is a word for that. I think it's called gaslighting. Go on then, Pandora. Here we go. In other news, gets techie as far as Zak Brown's concerned, because he's been in court today. The court case is all around Alex Palou. You will recall that Zak Brown said that he was going to sign Alex Palou. There was contracts. Alex Palou said, deal, done, bet, I'm over there, IndyCar settings. However, on the proviso that one day in the not too distant future, I'll be driving for McLaren F1, not IndyCar, where that was the initial contract. But then they agreed, did they not? And then what did McLaren do? On Oscar Piastri's legislative foibles with Alpine, Oscar Piastri left, Mark Webber counselled that McLaren potentially could be the team to beat over the next couple of years, that they're doing bits. Andrea Stella's over there. Rob Marshall is over there. They have intellectual minds, and they might, over the course of the next 3 years, build themselves a God-tier counsel from Mark Webber. Who better to know about missed opportunities and how to avoid for them than Webber himself? Multi-21, not bad for a number 2 driver. 2010, 2012, should have, definitely could have won 2010. Went into the final Grand Prix ahead, if I recall correctly. Today, however, they were in court arguing. Zak Brown is saying, you know what? By ceasing, by not upholding the contract, Alex Palou, you lost us earnings. We lost sponsorship because of that, because we couldn't have a marquee name in Alex Palou in our car. Here's where it gets techie. I'm going to read out. I don't want to read out, but this is important. It's granular. It's techier than techie things. Motorsport.com. James Elson writes, McLaren boss Zak Brown clashes with Alex Palou and tells him, you are talking rubbish. The flipping cheek of Zak Brown. You know who's talking rubbish, Zak Brown? You are, sir, when you're talking about all this egalitarian stuff and these rules of engagement. And what's worse, after the Singapore Grand Prix, you want to talk about talking rubbish? Tell me that this is not. After the Singapore Grand Prix, Zak Brown was asked if that was fair from Lando. Zak Brown had this to say. He said, yeah, it was hard and fair racing. You come on, Zach. Come on, really, mate. Like, again, asking us to do one of these. Avert our eyes from the light of truth, objectivity. No, Zak Brown. No, we will not. This motorsport.com article continues that Zak Brown came under attack in court today, but wasn't afraid to shoot back as he attempted to justify why his McLaren team is owed a round number of $20.7 million by IndyCar champion Alex Palou, because he's gone on to do all right as Alex. Do you know what I mean? 3-4-time champion, if I recall correctly. He's gone on not to do bad things. Sons Zak Brown. Here's what Motorsport says. Where he's previously had to head off Christian Horner and Toto Wolff, Zak Brown sparred for 6 hours at the Royal Courts of Justice with Nick DeMarco KC, King's Counsel. The lawyer representing Alex Palou as McLaren seeks $20.7 million or 15.43 million Great British pounds in damages for this year's Indy 500 winner reneging on his IndyCar contract with the team. Palou and his associated management companies are challenging the amount claimed. Of course, they're saying it's too high. DeMarco began, and this is where it gets techie chat, arguing salacious. I love it. DeMarco, King's Counsel, representing Alex Palou, began the day by accusing Brown of stringing Palou along with the prospect of a drive in Formula One. It was never there. As soon as they signed Oscar Piastri, you're gonna hire Palou in to be a reserve driver, hold him hostage on the pit lane, on the pit wall, even just like Aston Martin were doing Felipe Drugovich. Behave yourself. Alex Palou's like, no, I'm a star in and of my own right. Watch me win all these bloody IndyCar championships, you clown. Zak Brown. He then grilled Brown, did King's Counsel, DeMarco, in a cross-examination which built up into a series of exchanges that were at times heated and other comedic, as the two disagreed on the finer details of emails, covered how to turn on WhatsApp's disappearing messages, and raised the question of whether 2022 Indy 500 champion, Marcus Ericsson is actually any good. So here's what we're dealing with. The case, he was like, well, you could have signed Ericsson, you could have signed this one, you could have signed that one. Zak Brown's case is no, this lost earning numbers figure is true and fair. We lost sponsorship. Don't tell me about we could have signed this one, we could have signed that one. He's like, you know what, we could have signed that, Zak Brown's word, not mine, that we could have gone and signed Nigel Mansell, but I hear he hasn't won any races for ages. It's a protracted argument over the subject of an email chain which Brown claimed was to do with the financial aspect of Kyle Larson's Indy 500 entries, and which DeMarco disagreed was dissolved, blah 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 blah. Brown piffly replied, I think you are talking rubbish. The KC, to instigate that response, said, in the past half an hour, you have spoken absolute rubbish, Zak Brown, which you have just made up on the spot. Perhaps you have convinced yourself of it. Brown again responds, I think you're talking rubbish. Well, Zak Brown, I'm responding to you now. I think you are talking rubbish. Rules of engagement, papaya rules, consistent across both your drivers. Behave yourself. All of the aforementioned Gone with the Wind faded to black at the Singapore Grand Prix this weekend, when you've disenfranchised your driver, by the way, who is leading the Drivers' Championship as at the time of writing, to the tune of 21-22 points. Why would you cheese that guy off such that he might be looking to pastures anew already, like Danny Rick had to do back in the day when he realised that Max Verstappen had the whip hand and his team was invested only in his success? DeMarco mentioned that the American... Go on then. DeMarco began to reel off names that he could have signed, new and old. Zak Brown could have elected to hire instead of the Spaniard Alex Palou. At one point highlighting 2014 Indy 500 champion Ryan Hunter-Reay, Brown replied, I could have also approached Nigel Mansell like Ray. He has not driven in a while, though. Cheeky. Zak Brown's got some cheek. He's got a bit of chat, hasn't he? Fork of tongue. When DeMarco mentioned, continued the article, that the American had last won a race in 2018, the McLaren boss required, what year is it now? Oh, the humanity. Zak Brown going 10 toes down on his defence, eh? McLaren's case against Palou is partly based on reduced income from one of its main sponsors, NTT Data, which has recently announced it will be ending its involvement with the McLaren IndyCar squad from the 2026 season. Here's why this is interesting. We spoke earlier about commerciality, right? And the power that comes in that. If we are playing hypothetical games here, you can bet your bottom dollar that there is one of those McLaren drivers with whom comes more commercial gravitas. He has a name, and his name is Lando Norris. You saw him on the front cover of British Vogue. He is a mainstream star in the making. Girls want to be with him. Guys want to be him. He is that type of dude. Yeah, he's got a penchant for underperforming, particularly in qualifying this year. Has he got a penchant for making mistakes of the unforced variety? Absolutely. But yeah, and still, as a mainstream superstar, you can't argue with a straight face that the power doesn't rest with Lando Norris. Understand, therefore, as the commercial mastermind of McLaren, worthy of praise, by the way, but for Zak Brown, McLaren could have gone under. If it was Ron Dennis era, McLaren would be, it was named something different now. Do you know what I mean? They would have been taken over ages ago. It would no longer be McLaren. Well, we could talk about that another day, right? Because they've been getting investment left, right, and centre. But I digress. Zak Brown is worthy of praise for the way that he's managed to prop up the financial resource behind McLaren. He kept all of the title sponsors engaged. When McLaren were right at the back of the pack, 10 of 10 teams on the grid, they would drop dead last. And for that, he's worthy of absolute praise. He's a commercial mastermind, this Zak Brown guy. However, what he's not, on the basis of the most recent evidence of Singapore, he's not an F1 mind. Some might say it's mission impossible, that it was always going to work out this way, that there is no balancing two young, hungry prospects and fire-breathing dragons like OJP and Lando, both of whom are now fighting almost exclusively for a championship of the drivers' variety. Of course, it was always going to end in tears. But that being said, I feel like Zak Brown's made a run for his own bat now. All this egalitarian talk, rules of engagement, make sure you don't touch. Oscar, that wasn't within the papaya rules. That was a bit ambitious. Be careful. And then Lando hits Oscar Piastri and starts celebrating without compunction, by the way, and with no remorse. I'm the last person here to be calling it. Easy G, go easy, mate. Herzl, truth you're not. Now that McLaren has their cherished WCC, what changes with team orders restricting a drive? I don't think it's the team orders, Benzi. I think it's the way in which the drivers will interact with each other. That's what's going to change. Oscar Piastri, it's an inflection point. Friend of the channel, PTD Wins, has said on our latest chat, right? It's an inflection point in the season. It was always going to happen. It was a matter of when, therefore, and not if. But now Oscar doesn't care. Oscar's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Now all of the employees, now that they've all got their bonus in Woking, like, I'm going hard. This is my championship. Go away. Best thing, actually ignoring them. You don't need them. I don't know what's going on. South Africa. Truth Peddler, Easy G. Easy G's all right, man. I know you're a big Lando fan, Easy G, but it's going to get techie for all fans all over the world. The next 6 races are going to be Peakums. Cota up next. Mate, you remember last year, Cota, Lando and Max when it got techie. Tom Starlard keeps Oscar on the papaya line. It's interesting that you say that, Benzi. I think Tom Stollard was being told what to say. I don't think he's got a lot of autonomy over the commands that he gives Oscar. I feel like I could hear it in his tone of voice. I don't know. Is Oscar throwing elbows at Zak now? Go on then, Ty Mac. I think not necessarily at elbows, but I think after Singapore, Oscar Piastri, as the leader in the driver's standings in 2-5, has no alternative but to draw a line. Say, this is the line beyond which I won't go, at the altar of team ethos and altruism and philanthropy. I'm here to win a championship. I don't want to be like Mark Webber and another no champion Aussie. You guys in Australia know that it's a winning culture, right? There is no respect. Losers aren't held. I was talking to a good friend back in us, and he said that Mark Webber is the biggest moaner and just gets disrespected in Australia because he should have won a championship, at least one. But again, he didn't do it. So you think OJP? Cammy's cult OJP? I don't think so, Michael. Is there a cult OJP? I don't think so. So for OJP, of course, he's got to try. There is only one option. got to draw a line in the sand and do for him, act in his own best interest now, without compunction, with impunity. There is no other choice. If of course, he wants to win himself a championship of the driver's variety, not bias. OJP will have his elbows out. Dyslexic, 100% Herta. What else is he gonna do? What else would you expect? Chokers not beloved. Easy G's okay. Right, guys, I'm gonna run. You guys have been legends each and every single time. I appreciate you all. To the moon. Back, brand new Elite Peddlers. Get yourself over to the community tab and join the Discord if you are so inclined and want to continue the weird and wacky world that is F1 modes of discourse. I don't remember a WDC leader ever being so obviously undermined, even Webber. It was of it. It's techie, Sir John. I don't know what else to say to you, chap. It is very, very techie. I don't think they undermined him explicitly. What I didn't like, the full stop new paragraph for me, the conclusive statement from Zak Brown. Imagine Zak Brown telling Alex Palou's piece KC that he was that he's talking rubbish. The irony, Zak Brown. Oh, the humanity. It's you, Zak Brown, who was talking rubbish over the course of the race weekend in characterising the interaction between your two drivers as fair and hard racing. Zak Brown, you want to behave yourself. Got a lot of respect for Zak, but that is not it. That's disingenuous. That is evidently false, and we shan't tolerate it, because on this channel, what we will never ever do, sacrifice truth and objectivity at the altar of partisanship, cognitive dissonance, any of the aforementioned worthy of the moniker, oh the humanity.